We need this one. This is me communicating with the guys in Russia. So
but we won't be getting to them for what part of the program. We will see.
yes, okay. I'll go ahead. Sure. Gonna get started. All right.
We've,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Uhuru, comrades. I'm Ron Bob, the Director of Economic Development, Education and Propagation, or simply referred to as AgriProm. I'm also the manager of Uhuru Radio, and we're looking forward to having our own Black FM radio station, 96.3 FM here in St. Petersburg, or more importantly, right here in this building. We will be kicking off our fundraiser for the radio station next Sunday, June 14th, right here at 4 p.m. So we encourage members of the community to be here so that we can kick off this fundraiser for our brand new FM station. Well, in the Uhuru movement, it is customary that we begin our meetings by standing fist forward and we lead in unison the African pledge, which is printed in your program. I pledge allegiance to my African people. I pledge to develop my mind and body to the greatest extent possible. I will learn all that I can in order to give my best to my people and our struggle for liberation through revolution. I will keep myself physically fit, building a strong body free from drugs and other substances, which weaken me and make me less capable of defending myself, my family, and my African brothers and sisters. I will unselfishly share my knowledge and understanding with others in order to bring about change more quickly. I will discipline myself to direct my energies thoughtfully and constructively rather than wasting time in idle danger. I will train myself never to hurt or allow others to harm African brothers and sisters, for I recognize that we need every African man, woman, and child to be physically, mentally, and psychologically strong. These principles I pledge to practice daily and to teach them to others in order to unite my people in the struggle for freedom and independence. Uhuru. On May 26th, Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Comrade Bakri Latunji left St. Petersburg, Florida, and Oakland, California, respectively, on a whirlwind tour of Moscow, Russia. To say the least, chatting with the chairman on Africa Live early today on Uhuru Radio, the trip was not just memorable, but important to and for the chairman and the party. He is a wide awake now, having suffered from a serious bout of jet lag. So let's give the leader of our movement a resounding welcome back greeting as he reports to us on this historic trip that he made to Russia. Chairman Omali.
I want to express appreciation to everybody who's come out. I know there are other people who are in the process of getting here, but I felt like it was important for us to start the meeting on time, and perhaps we can influence better practice in terms of people arriving to the meetings on time. Also, understand that we are having at this moment some problems with the internet, and I don't think it's a coincidence. We had indicated that we would report on this trip to Moscow, and objective was to work to live stream this report so that all of our supporters and members around the world will be able to participate in this meeting. And also we wanted to allow the comrades in Russia who brought us there, who functioned as our hosts, who toured us throughout Moscow and established the meetings and contacts we had. We wanted them to have an opportunity to say some things to us here. So the setup was to allow them to see and participate in this meeting, as well as other people from around the world and throughout the country in our movement, and to give people an opportunity to hear from them because they experienced this tour just as I did. The question of going to Russia, and people raised questions with me about it. I did a radio interview, and somebody asked me, there was a radio show in Washington, D.C. It's a very popular show in Washington, D.C. And the host of the radio show asked me, did not think it was possible that the Russians who invited me to come there had done so in order to use me in some fashion against the United States. And I thought it was an incredible kind of question. It was startling kind of question. It was not easy for me to respond to it and with a straight face because I didn't understand how the notion of Russians using me by inviting me to Russia could even be some kind of fracture, could even be something that somebody would think about. And the fact is that I went there to do what I could to use the Russians. The fact is that we have a situation where we're involved in a life and death struggle with U.S. imperialism and have been forever. And for the longest period of time subsequent to the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s, we've been in a state of near isolation. And it's important to us to be able to establish and identify allies all around the world who can unite with us in this struggle that we have with this terrorist organization that calls itself the United States government. And I didn't understand why the brother who asked me that question didn't understand that. And the truth of the matter is any casual, objective examination of history would show that Russia has done more for the liberation of African people here and around the world than anything America has ever done. And Russia has had to go up against American interests in order to advance the struggle of African people, whether here or any place around the world. And during my development as a political activist, I had to encounter over and over again supporters and operatives of the United States government by media sources, etc., that I was involved in the struggle for freedom and liberation because I was being paid by the Russians. So that was quite a statement to me that there was a notion that somehow the Russians would pay me to get free. The Americans definitely weren't paying anybody to get free. America was doing everything they could to make sure I never saw freedom. So I just thought that was a strange kind of question, but I think it was maybe typical of how many people understand some things that's happening in the world today. How did I get to Russia? Well, we got an invitation from an organization whose banner should have been up here by now. This is to say about this organization that it is not up here. that is known as the anti-globalization movement of Russia. And this anti-globalization movement of Russia is an organization that defines itself as being committed to struggling to establish relationships between peoples and nations and going around governments in order to do that. And it defines itself as being interested in creating a multipolar world. And which is to say that it's a struggle against U.S. hegemony, a U.S. domination of the world, where the United States assumes the ability and right to determine how everything should happen in the world, based essentially on the fact that they've got all the guns. They've got nuclear weapons, and especially with the collapse of the Soviet Union, this is how the U.S. had seen itself and seen the world for a long period of time. And as most people in this room are aware, over the last several years, there is a real crisis of this whole international social system has become more and more obvious. And it manifests itself, this crisis, in 1,000 different ways. But one of the outstanding features of this crisis is the growing resistance of oppressed peoples around the world to the established social order that represents itself in the form of people everywhere fighting to overturn this relationship they have with imperialism. So in South America, that's the case, has been for a while now. As soon as the United States thought that it was had reached this place where it had absolute domination, Fidel Castro, they were anticipating would be dead any moment. And then they look up, there's Hugo Chavez, and there's the struggle of people in Venezuela, and then on the wake of that, there's Ecuador, there's Bolivia. Every place they look, the people in South America that used to be referred to as the backyard of the United States, the people were taking back their resources and struggling to assume control of their future for themselves. And this was a terrible thing for the U.S. to have to deal with, because the whole economy, the economic order of the world has been created through a parasitic theft of human and material resources of the people of the world. Capitalism itself got established through slavery and through colonialism, and now the whole world economy, it has been organized around that, and now everybody's fighting to free themselves from this system. And so it creates crisis. And this crisis is made manifest in places in the Middle East where people just won't agree, just want to unite with the United States and Europe, that they should simply suffer without any assumption of a future for themselves and their children, so that oil could be cheaply supplied to people in the United States and Europe. People have decided that they want to be able to determine the future for their children, even if that means fighting against the U.S. Of course, that's essentially what it does mean, because the U.S. has been the great hegemon in the world. It has been a determining factor about who will be free and who won't be free. And so this crisis that we see is as a consequence, or it manifests itself in the struggle of people there, in the rise of China, who is a new imperial force itself on the make, but it's still one that challenges the status quo. The assumption of the United States and Western Europe would dominate the world, and now there's China that's hungry itself and a growing influence and challenging the U.S. hegemony not only in Asia, but as a growing economic force on the continent of Africa. And when we mention places like Asia, Africa, South America, these are not just locations in the world. These are places where tremendous amounts of resources are located that feeds the capitalist machine that has been usually historically under the leadership of Europe and North America. Now there's a fundamental change, a challenge to that relationship. And of course, as you know, subsequent to the collapse of the Soviet Union, something that was accelerated by the policies of James Earl Carter, who a lot of people like to remember as the last good president, but who is really the guy through his national security advisor, the jihad that the United States claims that it's fighting in places in the Middle East and North Africa, they were created by the United States government. And they were created as a means to challenge the Soviet Union that was supporting the struggle and the existence of the people in Afghanistan, and the objective by Brzezinski, who was Carter's national security advisor, was to create a Vietnam for the Soviet Union that would drain its resources, that would create enemies that they would have to fight in the same way Vietnam, this unjust terroristic colonial war of the United States resulted in loss of resources and lives and things like that for the United States. And so the United States and Carter's administration helped to create this modern jihad that the U.S. finds itself fighting now. If there's a 9/11, if it was true, Carter started it. Carter and Brzezinski created that situation. They're the ones who organized those forces and then sent them in. They trained them, they armed them, and sent them into Afghanistan. And this is the thing that's morphed and changed into the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and all these other manifestations that you see of the jihad out in the world today. That's what they have to fight against. So this crisis is there. And the fact is that it's a logical conclusion because just because the people were against the Russians in Afghanistan or the Soviets in Afghanistan did not mean they loved the United States. And so the United States armed them to the teeth and trained them and turned them into some of the most competent fighters in the world today. And you see that with the so-called Islamic State. And you see that with the jihad, with the Taliban, that they cannot defeat. They cannot defeat the Taliban. And you're talking about the Taliban in a place like Afghanistan where the people are so hungry, they don't even have resources to cook bread for their children. And the United States did that for 12, 13 years, and they cannot defeat those people there. And so you have this crisis that's out there. And you have a realignment of political forces that's happening in the world today that's challenging the whole hegemony, not only of America, but Europe itself. There's a whole shift in the balance of forces in the world. So that we define this as a magnificent contest between the past and the future. The past being a past of colonialism and slavery, where U.S. and European imperialism, white power dominated the whole world, sucked the blood of the whole world. It's represented in the fact that in this world today, 80% of the people on the planet are trying to survive off less than $10 or less a day. 80% of the human beings on this earth. 50% of the human beings on this earth are trying to survive off $2.50 or less a day. And in Africa, people are lucky if they can get $1 a day. That's the kind of political and economic organization that has come as a consequence of this, the ascension of capitalism in the world. That people have mistakenly, and I say mistakenly, but some of them, it hasn't been a mistake. They have declared capitalism has been the most efficient economic system that has resulted in the rapid economic development of the world. And of course, it's done just the opposite. Because what capitalism has done is locked the vast majority of humanity out of the economic process, out of productivity, out of economic development. That's why 80% of the people are having one way of trying to survive, where 20% of the people are living well. That's capitalism. So obviously that's not this rapid, magnificent development. That's rapid and magnificent development of Europe and North America at the expense of Africa and the other oppressed peoples around the world. Got a whole economic social system. And if you got an economic system that functions this way, that's that's born of this process of slavery and colonialism, what happens in society, society is comprised of an economic base, right? An economic base and a superstructure that responds to that particular base. And when you talk about a superstructure, you're talking about not only things like political institutions, culture, ideas, the ideology that rests upon that economic base is one that reinforces the existence of the base, that explains that reality for everybody else in the world. That's why people talk about racism, racism, racism. It's natural. It's natural what they call racism. I'll use that term for this moment because the ideas in the heads of the white people and others reflects the economic base of the society itself. When you got a society born of slavery and the colonialism of the vast majority of the people in the world and the institutions and ideas that spring will represent that reality. It will represent that reality. So there's no way you can get around that. If you got an economic system based on slavery, and it teaches freedom and liberation and revolution, then something is amiss here. And you won't have that from that economic base. That economic base based on slavery would teach the wonders of slavery, how wonderful it is, how it is really a beacon of democracy with everybody, and we got the guns and everything to make everybody agree with that. That's what that kind of reality will create. So the idea is simply a reflection of the economic base of the society itself. But increasingly what's been happening is oppressed people have been breaking free, and in the process of breaking free, they've also been challenging the existing narrative. They've been challenging the imperial narrative. They've been challenging the basic narrative that's defined this reality for everybody in the world. And so the slave has found her voice and is beginning to talk, and this sector of the population that always has been able itself as a subject of history and the rest of us as objects of history, this sector of the population now finds itself having to hear from the slave and the colonized, who now are stepping forward and becoming subjects of history in our own right. And then for the first time, the ones who define the existing narrative find themselves now existing as objects of history from the perspective of the slave and the oppressed. And that creates a real disturbing sense of well-being among the oppressor nations, among the colonizer population, because they've never heard this before. You can't say anything living under, you can't even talk back to the cop in your community. I mean, the brutality to make sure that the prevailing narrative except now there was a Fidel, there was a Che Guevara, there was a Malcolm X, and there was a Patrice Lumumba, there was a Kwame Nkrumah, and there was a Ben Bella. All of these people now are standing up and speaking a language that has been before. And so anyway, this crisis is something that now represents itself in the form of permanent warfare. It's not just one little war over here. It's permanent warfare. Everywhere you look up, there's war. There's threats of war. And there has been war going on now 14, 15 years against some of the most impoverished people on the planet Earth. Yeah. And now what has happened is the U.S. has moved since the collapse of the Soviet Union. It has been rapidly moving to take up all the political territory in that area of the Soviet Union. And post some of the entities, countries, and what have you that were once a part of the Soviet Union, now are not part of the Soviet Union. And they have been, the United States has been pushing NATO bases in those areas and putting missiles and things like that in those areas. And the objective, of course, is to contain continue the containment of what used to be the Soviet Union, now contain Russia, to make sure that Russia cannot contend with U.S. and imperialist interests in that region. They want to dominate all of that region, and a strong Russia would prohibit that. So put up NATO bases, surround Russia to make sure that it can never be a threat to the interests of the United States. That's what this has been going on. So the U.S. Actually engineered a coup in Ukraine. The people had elected a president, and the U.S. actually engineered through its agent a coup and chased the existing president out of Ukraine. And once and it revolved around the question of whether or not Ukraine would be allied with Russia, or whether Ukraine would be allied with U.S. through Europe. And so the U.S. supported its own forces and made it push this force out, and then ended up taking having an election on those terms, their terms, that got their guy in power. And what happened was, of course, the objective there was to establish NATO bases and to just go right up to the border of Russia. And while it's forgotten that Ukraine has historically been connected to Russia, and that especially in eastern Ukraine, there are essentially Russians live there. And it was only Khrushchev's gesture several years ago, I guess that might have been in what, the 50s or 60s, that resulted in what they call Ukraine being separated from the rest of Russia. And what must be understood also is when I was in Moscow, the Russians were celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Russian defeat of the Nazi army, of Hitler's army. And most people here don't understand that it was the Russians who crushed Hitler's army, the Nazis, because they like to, you get fed pablum that talks about how the U.S. won World War, that's what they call World War II. But the United States didn't even enter the war until 1944, right? So it didn't even play a significant role until 1944 when they entered the war. But the Russians, and the reason why is because they sat on the sideline because they wanted to see Hitler and the Nazis destroy the Soviet Union. They wanted the Soviet Union destroyed because the Soviet Union was a revolutionary society based on the assumption of the working class and working people being the authority in society as opposed to the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, and they hated that. So they wanted to see the Soviet Union destroyed, and so they sat back for Hitler to destroy the Soviet Union. And they underestimated the will of the Russian people, and of course they underestimated the strength of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union. And that must be clearly stated because there were more than 26 million Russians died in that war. And there's not a Russian there that did not lose a they crushed Hitler. And then after they crushed Hitler, there came this race for Berlin. Who was going to capture Berlin? And this race happened between the U.S. and British and Russia. And of course, we may have, we're live now on Guru News, by the way, so the live streaming is occurring. So the Soviet Union captured Berlin, and I had an opportunity to be at this magnificent museum of the Russian defeat of the Nazis in 1945. And they have parts of the edifices that came from the Reichstag in Berlin, Germany, sitting in the museum. And they've got pictures of the Russians holding up the red flag, you know, at the Capitol in Berlin. And so the Russians took it, and they paid a dear price for that struggle. And so now we have the situation where China is contending, Iran is contending, Iraq is unstable and growing under the control more and more every day of influence of Iran. Lebanon is unstable, growing more and more as a consequence of Hezbollah's influence, under the influence of Iran. And Syria is being destroyed now in part because of the influence of Iran and because it was an independent force that could not be controlled absolutely by the United States government, even though it had collaborators at different times with the United States government. Libya was wiped out because it also represented a threat to U.S. interests in the Middle East, particularly around that illegitimate, hostile, white nationalist settler state of Israel. So a whole new change was happening in the whole globe. More forces were rising up, challenging the hegemony and U.S. power. And now here's Russia. And they pushed Russia and pushed Russia. And all of these Russian leaders had made concessions to the United States until Putin. And so when Putin arrived, and Putin is no socialist or anything like that, but he is a Russian patriot. He's a Russian nationalist, among other things. And so what happened was that, and now Russia is recovering economically because it had a severe economic crisis over a period of time. And it had reached a state of some recovery, was able to arm itself to be able to feed the people in a decent way again, and it was able to push back against U.S. encroachment in that area of the world. And even though they had worked to seduce Putin and Russia, but trying to include it into this thing that they call the G7, the Global 7. This is the group of so-called economic powerhouses that wanted to define the economy of the world and say how everybody would be able to eat or not be able to eat. And so they brought Russia on board. They played ball correctly because they would not give up Ukraine just because of that. And so there's been this ongoing sanctioning, they call it sanctioning against Russia. And the objective is to punish Russia for not cooperating in its own surrender, for not cooperating in its own submission. And so they put up sanctions because Russia is not Syria. Because Russia is not Libya, right? Because to one of the Russian commentators that's quite popular in Russia today had made the statement that Russia is the only country that could turn America into a nuclear axe. So you don't go into Russia like you go into Syria. You don't go into Russia like you go into Libya. You have to have second thoughts about how you move with Russia. And so this has been extremely problematic, even though you have frothing at the mouth reactionaries in this country like John McCain and others who are talking about they need to go ahead and do everything they can and arm the people in Ukraine. And Ukraine's government is a thuggish government. It's a thuggish, corrupt government. And what you have to understand in Ukraine, the Russians paid a dear price during the Second Imperialist War, World War II in Ukraine, because they are the ones who fought and crushed the fascists in Ukraine. The Russians did that. And that's what they're fighting today in Ukraine with all of these so-called democratic forces that supposedly represents peace and progress. They are fascists. They are left over from Hitler's regime. That's what they are. And the Russians are the ones who are standing up in America and England and all these countries are talking about how the Russians are violating international law, international norms, etc. And Putin is the deal. Right? So so that's the context that we go into the United States, into Moscow. We go into Moscow within this context. We go into Moscow while the United States in particular is pushing to force sanctions and make the Russians pay a price. And the objective being to cause pain in the Russian population that would turn them against Putin, right? And that could facilitate some form of regime change in Russia and or force the Russians to change their policies. But I'm telling you, I was only in Moscow for a few days, but it was long enough to tell you that they're crazy if they think that's going to work. I'm telling you, I was there, and I was there I got off the airplane in Russia, going to a meeting, And I was in meetings up until 3 o'clock in the morning sometime, every day that I was there, in and out, nothing but meetings all over Moscow. And I'm going to tell you this, that Moscow, first of all, 15 million people in Moscow. There is no evidence of pain in Moscow at all. Unless the person who is selling all of these transparencies that people put in the back of their car windows, and they got all kinds of model cars. Don't think that Russia is some kind of backwater, etc. And there's no pain unless the person who is making all the money selling these transparencies that they put in the back of their window that says Obama is a creep hurt himself. The persons who were making those injured themselves, there's no pain that I saw in Moscow. And Moscow is a city of 15 million people. And I've gone to the supermarkets, and I've traveled everywhere, I'm telling you, all over Moscow. And the striking thing about Moscow is the modernity, but it's not just modern, plastic modern that you see in America. You see Western history in the architecture, and you see it even in the modern edifices that you can find there. And it is the cleanest city I've ever been in. And it's striking because in Moscow, you know how it is in some cities in this country where you only park on some time of the week, you park on one side of the street because the guys are going to come and sweep the streets and on that day. Well, that was happening all day, every day in Moscow. All the streets, all the time. In the public squares, there's this thing coming along, sweeping the streets. And the interstate, you ride on the highway, there's these vehicles going down, washing down the highways. It's an extraordinary clean city. And in a city of 15 million people, for the days that I was there, I went every place. I was on the subways and every place else. In a city of 15 million people, I only saw one bear. And in a city this small, in St. Petersburg, Florida, you can't walk for 15 minutes without seeing a beggar, etc. This is the people who are supposed to be suffering from the sanctions. You got under every underpants somebody with a cardboard sign that says, "Feed me, I'm hungry." Standing in front of every convenience store, somebody with a styrofoam cup, begging for stuff. That's not Russia. You do not see that in Russia. And I think it's very important to understand that. They are not hurting. The people are not hurting in that fashion. But the bigger thing that's being missed here is the patriotism and the courage of the Russian people itself. Russian society, even though it is not a socialist society at this moment, modern Russian society is a child of the Bolshevik Russian socialist revolution. Modern Russian society is a child of the socialist revolution. Lenin brought a modern modern Russian society into existence, and it was a society that was born in that achieved this character, that developed, came out of this semi-feudal state of the Shah under the leadership of the Bolsheviks. It was a society that came into existence fighting in the interests of the poor and the oppressed and the working class. It is a society, wherever it may be, that everybody in Russia didn't believe in it, but the Soviet Union is the place where they actually gave arms and support to the struggle of the people in Vietnam to fight against U.S. imperialism and to fight against U.S. interests. That's the Russian people that we're talking about. It was the Russians. I went to one place I went to in Moscow, that it used to be called the Patrice Lumumba University, named after the leader in the Congo that was murdered by U.S. CIA agents and French and Belgian agents, etc. And in this university, it was created to train revolutionaries in Africa and other places to fight for freedom. That the Russian people participated in making that happen. Their tax dollars, their support, their resources went to facilitate that. It was the Russians who supported the struggle in Cuba. It was the Russians who supported the Chinese Revolution. It was the Russians who supported the struggle in Vietnam. It was the Russians Angola. The Russians did that. The Russians did that. And that has had to have kind of impact on the Russian population. That modern Russian society has its origin in that, even though it was under the leadership of the Soviets. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And what was really striking was everywhere I went, just how open and warm the Russians were, everywhere. And I got off the airplane, I had stopped just long enough to take a shower, didn't have an iron or anything, throw on something to go to a meeting. And the first meeting I went to, there was at a site that used to be the place where the Warsaw Pact used to meet. And it was a federation of Russian migrants, the Federation of Russian Migrants, a conference of the Federation of Russian Migrants. And the Russian migrants are a lot of people from different places, essentially from what used to be the former Soviet Union and other places in that region. Many of them live in Russia. But the Russian government has facilitated their ability to have this organization that looks out for their interests as people who are living in Russia from other places. And so they have these conferences on a regular basis. And the keynote speaker at this conference was the Syrian ambassador to Russia. And a lot of other people. I mean, it was a round table with a lot of people there, and I had an opportunity to say a few words there as well. And I think that the Russian people want to see people who disagree with the policies of the United States government toward Russia. And they didn't have to scratch hard when they came to me. You understand? And I was quite explicit in my statement. And I was helping to say, and I think this is important, that the Russian people and the Russian government, when it comes to a propaganda struggle against the United States government, the first thing that must be understood by everybody in the world, that the United States is not a normal, if you will, a so-called nation. That the United States is more akin to the state of Israel. It is an entity, a state that was founded on stolen land, where you have a group of people leave someplace else and come and take somebody else's land, and the traditional custodians of the land, those who remain essentially are in concentration camps that they call Indian reservations. I said that what you must understand and what you must begin to use in your ideological debates with the United States is that the United States has to exist so half of Mexico. And when you look at California, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, etc., Texas, you're looking at the soul. And that when you look at the economy of the United States, it was an economy that was built on stolen black labor. This is the United States. So don't let them say anything to you about Ukraine. If they can't say anything about the barrios and the ghettos in America, then they shouldn't be able to say a damn thing about anything that's happening in Ukraine. This is our message. This is our message. And so this is what we said there to them. And that we are not here as some American patriots talking about let's all get along together. We are here because we want the Russian people to stand in solidarity with the struggle of African liberation in the United States and around the world. That's why we're here. So, before it was over, there were a few Soviet generals. These are generals from the Soviet era who were there. And one of them was giving medals of honor to different forces who were there. And at least one general was a recipient of the Medal of Honor, and I think they may have given one or two to somebody else. And then they gave one to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So that was cool. We met Africans from Ethiopia there. We met people who were from the party of Russian veterans were at that meeting. And from there, we went a whole bunch of other places, and we had this incredible meeting with the Night Wolves, which is a motorcycle club, right? People say, what the hell are you doing with a motorcycle almost like a gang in the United States. And these guys are something else. They got an incredible compound. They have their own sort of clothing line, and they are real close to Putin, the president. And some countries won't even let them come into the country. It is suggested that the night wolves, also some of the forces who are fighting with the so-called rebels in Ukraine to push back the U.S. supported puppet regime there. Had great meetings with them. It's hard to believe. They wouldn't let me leave. You know, they kept finding all kinds of excuses to have me stay a day longer. Comrade, you know, this is what was going on, you know. And I said, you know, what you eat? He said, no, I'm a vegetarian. Get some vegetables, get something for this guy. I said, I don't want it to be, I just ate, you know, but this is the hospitality that they demonstrated. And then from there, and I'm, you know, like in the same sequence, because every night, every day, they all rolled into one. But I spoke to what used to be the Patrice Lumumba Coalition, Patrice Lumumba University. I went there. The vice president was the person who introduced me, set it up, and then the person who moderated in this meeting that I had with students, must have been 50, 60, 70 students there, was the person who might be characterized as the dean of students. Had a great discussion there. And again, my message is the same there as it was in the Federation meeting with the Russian migrants, and my message is the same, that people should not be seduced by this nonsense of U.S., the beacon, the shining city on the hill, the beacon for democracy. That ain't nothing that anybody who lives there is experiencing. This is America that I want to tell you about. I'm going to tell you about the United States of America. And so that was a good place. They created this magnificent spread. I think that's going to be like on the video that we showed to eat. Problem was that I couldn't eat anything but bread and grapes because I'm a vegan, and they had the Russians haven't got down pat yet, not the ones that we were hanging with. And so while I was there, they gave me gifts, and this pen is a gift from the dean, what would be the dean of students right here. I think this person may have been something like Armenian, etc. And this is some pen that I got from them. And it was just a really great session. And they like toasting a lot. And they said that you can't have a Russian experience unless you have some Russian vodka. And I said, I'm going to have to miss that part. I'm going to have to miss that part. And the process that is that you toast and you have a shot of vodka, and then you talk and discuss everything. After a while, you pour someone to stand up, and you do another toast and another shot of vodka. So they were toasting all throughout this process. I was toasting water. Yeah, I was toasting water. So we went through that. And I only have a few minutes because I talked a lot because we had this problem with the internet that I thought the state had taken us down and didn't want this to be something that everybody could share with us. And so we went to the criminal, and I saw, now you talk about the White House and all this stuff, you know, Whitehall in London, the criminal, what an extraordinary, magnificent edifice. This is a seat, like a power and government in Russia. And it's an extraordinary place. And I went to Red Square. You know, this is the place that they used to show you in the newsreels and all the movies when they want to tell you how bad Russians were. Look at they've got all these weapons just going by, Stalin standing at the top of the thing. This magnificent thousands of troops passing through Red Square. I was at Red Square. I went to Lenin's mausoleum. It was closed, so I couldn't go in there, but I was at the mausoleum. You're going to see some footage of the changing of the guard at the Eternal Flame in Red Square. What a magnificent sight that is. And this is from the whole Soviet period, right, in Moscow. To see these guys and say, wow, that's what power looks like. You understand? And so we had that experience, and we went to the museum, the museum of the war that they have created that is just fabulous. You wouldn't believe it. It went to the subways. It went down into the subways. This ain't no New York subway. This is the cleanest, most efficient subway you ever want to see. And you go down there, there's no graffiti there because people wouldn't mark it up. It's got art here, it's got statues over here that shows the Soviet people, and from the Soviets, from the Russian Revolution, from the Soviet Revolution, it shows the Kronstadt sailors, you know, armed to the teeth, who fought against the Tsar and against Russian feudal society, etc. You got women in arms and whatever. Just a magnificent situation to be there. Statue of Lenin in there. Went to Karl Marx Square. Huge statue of Karl Marx, an idealized statue of Karl Marx that was there. Big sign across the street saying, proletarians of the world, unite. You understand? This is the stuff that's been feeding the Russian people all these years since the overturn of Tsardom and capitalism in Russia. This is the people that Obama is stupid enough to think that some sanctions is going to be able to bring them to the knees. The people who lost 26 million people fighting against the Nazis. They think they're going to bring them crazy. And so the Russian people were extraordinarily open during this process. And then we went also to the headquarters of the anti-globalization movement, where I did another interview. I had done a couple of interviews media outlet, had done an interview with, it might have been Pravda, a Russian newspaper there. And I'm at now the anti-globalization movement of Russia at their headquarters, where we're doing an interview, and that went splendidly. And I think we'll have some footage from that. And then the young comrade who's the leader of the anti-globalization movement is also a member of the Russian Communist Party. So at that meeting, I got another Medal of Honor from the Russian Communist Party. So I said, I'll take it, put it up here. I'll take this one too, right? Because we want all the solidarity we can get, don't we? And if things go bad, you know, nothing doesn't come. And that's a bad joke, but the comrades were enormously open and friendly, and you know, one can easily think that, well, maybe this is a show that they just put on for me because I was brought there, right, by them. And I'm convinced that the Russians are aware of this ideological war that they're involved in with America. I'm aware of it. So one could think that, but shortly after I got back, I'm at the credit union, and I run into a classmate of mine from whom I haven't seen in many years. I've seen one time before now since 1950 or something. And so I run into her, we regularly just happened to see her talking, and she said, I thought you would be in Nigeria. And I said, no, I just got back from Russia. She said, where were you? In Moscow. She said, oh, have you ever been to this place? I said, well, you've been to Russia. I said, yeah, I've been to Russia. You know, been to Moscow, been to St. Petersburg, and went there on my own. And she said, America is full of lies. I said, what do you mean? She said, the things they say about Russia and Russians, they are full of lies. She said that I have never seen such an open people as I've met when I was in Russia. She said, I'm sure you noticed that when the Russians hug you, they really hug you, don't you? I said, they don't hug me like they hug you. She was a hell of a lot better than I did, right? But that was the point that she was making. She had the same experience. And she wasn't there as some kind of political force. She was there as some teacher on some other thing, and she was by herself, running into Russians on the subway and other things like that. So it was a magnificent meeting, quite successful, and we have participated in trying to introduce the struggle for national liberation of African people in this country, not only to Russians, but to the allies of Russia. We ran into Venezuelans there in the subway, took some pictures, propaganda pictures with the Venezuelans because they're so against each other, that kind of thing. I met with the Motherland Party. And the head of the Motherland Party is also the head of the Stalingrad Club. And many of these are people from the Soviet era who hold up, and all the people, most of the people in Russia love Stalin. They love Stalin, the one that, all of us are taught that we're supposed to hate and what have you. So I met at the Stalingrad Club. That was a great meeting, quite open, and people are expressing all kinds of political solidarity. And that's the thing that we want to build on and develop. So I want to say that, and I think I have to get out of the way now. Am I on time?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely on time. So we'll move the agenda forward, and I thank you for your patience in listening to me.
Absolutely. Well, film captures spontaneity forever. And we were given an opportunity to watch this video. It's about 23 minutes long of the chairman in Moscow. And a couple of the things that he spoke about, we'll have an opportunity to see the changing of the guard, and etc. And right after this video, we're going to take you live to Moscow. We're going to come ask that the chairman had an opportunity to spend some time.
That's the Kremlin. That's all Miss Linda's once again, that's his name there. The founder of Moscow. Yeah. He's the founder of Moscow. It's the changing of the guard. These are the heroic cities that you fought against the Nazis, the heroic cities. Okay. These are some of the people. Subway also functions as bomb shelters, even against nuclear bombs. Even against nuclear. That's a steel gate. That's an architecture steel gate that closes if they use it for nuclear bomb shelters. Right? These are some of the statues in the museum, in the subway. The dog's nose is like that because students on their way to take exams and they pass it, they rub the dog's nose to love it. Bombers. Is there anything for Europe that you found about? These are Venezuelans coming out. They're coming up with the subway, the Metro. Those are the comrades from Venezuela. Up here, the lyrics written on the wall of the Soviet national anthem. That's what Paul Robeson was singing at the beginning of the film that we shot.
Person Orthodox Church of St. George.
This is the approaching the museum, the Moscow Museum. They're French, Russian American, French, Italian, not Italian, but somebody, British and Americans. This is at the museum. This is from the museum, inside the museum. These are features of the war that Russia fought against the German Nazi war machine. That's Alex, who is the leader of the anti-globalization movement. And this is at the meeting with the Federation, Conference of Federation of Russian Migrants. This is the general pinning and method. Where the Warsaw Pact meetings had happened during the Soviet era. This is with the students at the university. And it is very difficult for us to understand how is it illegal that the economic project of the United States is one that took the beginning of it by hundreds of people around As I began this discussion, I started with a statement that I hope will reveal that the United States itself was created as a covenantal state. It is because it would be easier to understand the activities of the United States throughout the world. How it has rushed in a period of unending war. That has resulted in crises everywhere. And that has also, as a sign of this crisis, resulted in the selection of Barack Hussein Obama as the modern face of U.S. affairs. It is a case of U.S. imperialism, which is the world hegemony, which is the leadership of Western imperialism. It is a case of U.S.
disguising itself in the face of the colonizers. And so I'm here because for at least 50 years of my life, I have been struggling in the United States. The whole terrorist races that Africans and other oppressed people have to the United States government. And have attempted to do this in solidarity with oppressed and other people throughout the world. So I want to thank you again for offering me this opportunity to speak to you, to share ideas, and also the only other thing which means that a long time ago, I come to the conclusion that the United States will never ever voluntarily or willingly provide freedom or peace for anyone on the planet Earth, including those of us who live within the United borders of the United States.
These are the people who prepare the food. This is the spread that they established for us after the event. There's the vodka.
It's been 85%. And all the time that's France would disappear off the planet tomorrow. And after those that's the spirit. Well, the spirit today. France for years and years and years. They were bonds freedom from France. Right? And the United States and other powers also needed to do relations to France. But it's not. You know what the France was in slaves. Black people who made their first successful workers' revolution, the first successful anti-slave rebellion in Europe. And then when it happened, they had to do reparations to France. Because the poverty and economic poverty was almost dominated by America, by France, by all the European powers, including Germany and everybody else. So they starved me. And I was like, France, how many France have any of them get rid of? There's talking about Russia and Ukraine or anything else like that. But that kind of history. And this is the argument that I make. That I think that if people would make America have to face, look in the mirror, force America to look in the mirror. If they hadn't looked in the mirror, they couldn't be looking at right.
Because I think that American government understands the real situation and understand the real history and understand the real place. It's not the government. It's not what we're talking about. Here's what the forces do. Here's how the Soviet Union did. The Soviet Union
not some, it wasn't think that the unipolar world is not unipolar. That's why Russia is such a concern, that's why China is such a concern. Other forces are right on the defensive now, trying to show why the American system is an ideal system, it's a great system. So when Russia and other countries began to show solidarity as the Soviet Union did, show solidarity with the best people around the world, and America had to defend itself. For the peoples around the world, it had to defend itself not to the American people, but it had to defend itself to the next victim of American policy, wherever that was in the world. And so what it did was it strengthened the people who were struggling against America and forced America to make certain kinds of concessions or at least pretend to do something at a time. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not talking about Americans, that's also Americans, no. But and the other thing is that as long as Americans get away with it, people in other places around the world feel isolated and they are less encouraged to fight back. But if Africans in Baltimore knew that Russians were siding with them, I'll tell you what happened first. That was extraordinarily inspirational to African people. The Palestinian, the call for the liberation of Palestine since solidarity with people in America against the U.S. empire. The government of Iran talked about that even in Russian parliament about saying a peacekeeping team to look at the interests of that people there. This kind of political act, which is an ideological assault on this whole notion of what America tries to pretend to be, that's where I put the unity of my Civil War. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's the end of it.
That is?
It's yeah. Partly that's the other. Uhuru. Yeah, as I think it's called at the bottom. As I mentioned, film captures spontaneity forever, and this would never be able to be replicated. And I had the opportunity to connect with the chairman this morning on Africa Live about this trip, and it was not only informative, it was not only necessary, but it was extremely emotional for our chairman. So just give him yet another round of applause. We're going to take you number 9 to Moscow with two of the comrades, Alex and Slava, who are awaiting the connection. Oh, we're going to try to get some resources before we go to Moscow? Into the program. Pardon me? You need a minute? Yeah. Okay, yeah, so Tammy, you're going to take advantage of that minute? and comrades, unfortunately, I will have to leave in about 20 minutes so that I can host my radio broadcast from 7 to 10 p.m. this evening. So in the meantime, I'm going to ask Comrade Tammy Harris to come forward and to try cause you to dig deep. In the meantime, and as soon as we make contact with Moscow, we will intercept and interrupt you, rather than having the comrades wait there in Moscow.
Uhuru. Y'all get ready. Get your checkbooks out. Chad, we take everything, but I hope everyone has really been able to appreciate just what a momentous occasion this was for the chairman to be invited to Moscow. And on behalf of the Department of Education and Propaganda and the African People's Social Party, we want to appreciate you for being here. And we want to be able to continue to bring to you this type of broadcasting so that you get the opportunity to share in the world, because we are changing the world. So today our goal is to raise $200. The guy you got in, you just snatched the basket. So we can do this. Does anybody got $200 you want to give right now? We don't have to make this long, but I do think this is a great occasion for you to support the work of the Uhuru movement of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And pleased and proud, and I hope that you are, that he is taking the steps, stepping out, reaching out to change the world, not just be a participant in the world, but to actually the world. So the basket is passing. If you can, please, Sister Yaida. $200 is our goal today. Actually, you know what is really exciting too about this is that I am a part of Uhuru Tours, which is the another organization committee inside the Uhuru movement that is responsible for managing a lot of the travel. Doesn't chairman, if I'm not mistaken, I think September possibly we may be looking to go back to Russia, which I think would be really exciting. The chairman is going to be at the Newark Harlem Book Fair, which is coming up soon. He also has been asked to be the keynote speaker at the Marcus Garvey tribute that is going to be hosted by Golden Ivory in Jamaica on August 16th. So I'm hoping that people will, hopefully we'll be able to live stream some of that. The opportunity to share in that, but our goal is to be able to allow you to be able to share in all of these strides that are being made by the Uhuru movement and our Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Are we ready yet?
Still.
Yes, and in November, the chairman and a contingent of organizers from the Uhuru movement will be traveling to South Africa. All over the world, Africans want to be free. And African internationalism is what we want to bring to them. And that is our Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Again, I just want to say, you know, how proud I am to be part of an organization that is changing the world, not just being bystanders, but actually making history. Uhuru.
And for those of you who are viewing on live stream on uhurunews.com, you can assist in raising some additional funds for the chairman and other members of the forces of the party to make this trip to South Africa in November. You can go to GoFundMe/African Nation Tour. That's GoFundMe.com/African Nation Tour. Our goal was to raise $15,000, and about 3 hours ago, we were a little over $12,000. So thank you for all those of you who donated, and we still need to make that goal of $15,000. So have we made contact yet?
No contact yet. Still waiting on them to join.
Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just somewhat rearrange the program a bit. If there we probably can have a Q&A section at this time, but with the chairman, which was scheduled a little later on in the program. So if you have any questions for the chairman, can we put that microphone back to the stand there, please? If you have any questions for the chairman, you just come forward, please.
I'm hoping we succeed in connecting with the comrades in Moscow. I'd like for you to have an opportunity to meet them. I think it would be important for them to be able to make this contact as well. It's been stated that there's a good possibility that I'll be back in Moscow in September, and they're in the process of possibly organizing and ability for me to speak before one of the state legislatures in Moscow. So I'm anxious to be able to do that. So I don't know if there's anything that we got.
I can hear you.
All right, splendid. We can thank
Мы в эфир выходим.
Окей. 1 second, Alex.
Секунду. Саш.
Делают. 1 second.
1 секунда.
Тамам.
Давай им Тимати включим.
All right. Give us about 30 seconds.
30 секунд нам дайте.
Проблем нет. All right, you guys, you guys are ready. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Скажи, я приветствую от имени антиглобалистского движения России, всех участников сегодняшнего мероприятия. Передаю большой привет товарищу Омали и всем его соратникам. Ухуру!
Greetings in the name of anti-globalization movement of Russia to everybody who participates in our today's broadcast, and I greet personally our dear comrade Omali and every one of his comrades. Uhuru.
Я благодарен, что сегодня мне позволили выступить перед нашими друзьями, и я прошу прощения, что не могу говорить на английском, но я надеюсь, что мы сможем друг друга понять.
I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk to our friends. It's a pity that I cannot speak English yet by myself, but I believe we'll be able to understand each other.
Мир меняется, но меняется он не в лучшую сторону.
The world is changing. It is changing to the worse.
Капиталистическая монополия достигла своего апогея.
Capitalist monopoly has reached its apogee, its boiling point.
Неоколониализм сегодня причина геноцида малых народов в странах по всему миру.
Neocolonialism is the reason of genocide of small nations worldwide.
Это причина и гуманитарных катастроф.
It is the reason for humanitarian catastrophes also.
Извращенные глобалистские амбиции правительства США и их союзников убивают традиционные ценности и подменяют культурные, этнические и другие каноны по всему миру.
The ambitions US government and its allies have are destroying people, destroying traditions around the world.
Я встречался за последние 5 лет с 12 президентами.
Within the last 12 years, I have met 12 presidents.
И все они говорили о новом мировом порядке, который сейчас мы видим. Видим его сегодня.
everyone, each of these presidents was talking to me about the new world order which we witness today.
Они говорили о том, что мы должны бороться.
They were telling me that we must fight.
Бороться за свои права.
We must fight for our.
Бороться за другие народы, за своих союзников.
Fight for other nations, fight for our allies.
И создать многополярный мир.
In order to create multipolar world.
Малкольм Икс говорил.
Malcolm X said.
Никто не может дать тебе свободу.
Nobody can give you freedom.
Никто не даст тебе равенство.
Nobody will give you equality.
Никто не даст тебе справедливость.
Nobody will give you justice.
Если ты мужчина, возьми их сам.
If you are a man, you should take it by yourself.
Сейчас по всему миру народы объединяются.
As of today, nations around the world are uniting.
Для того, чтобы противостоять однополярному мировому компоненту.
Uniting to stand against unipolar world.
Мы видим политику двойных стандартов в мире.
We see the politics of double standards in this world.
Мы видим, как на Ближнем Востоке с одной стороны поднимают голову ИГИЛ.
In Middle East, we see from one side this head of ISIS is rising.
С этими экстремистами, по идее, должен бороться весь мир.
It would seem that whole world should be fighting these extremists.
Но мы видим, как Америка проводит военные операции не в Ираке или Сирии, а наоборот потворствует этим организациям, поставляют туда деньги, лекарства и оружие.
But we see that United States government is not fighting them in Iraq or Syria, but instead providing them with weapons, money and medications.
И мы видим, как с другой стороны в Йемене, когда люди собрались для того, чтобы освободить свою страну от прозападного правительства.
From another point, we see Yemen, where people have gathered to liberate their country from a pro-Western government.
Америка собрала коалицию через Лигу арабских государств.
United States have used a League of Arab States in order to create coalition.
И начала бомбежки Йемена.
To start bombing Yemen.
Для того, чтобы вернуть президента Йемена обратно на его пост.
In order to reinstate dethroned president of Yemen.
Почему же тогда с Украиной они так не сделали?
Why they didn't do the same for Ukraine?
Почему, когда Янукович бежал в Россию,
Why, when Yanukovych has escaped to Russia,
сенатор Маккейн приветствовал толпу на Майдане?
Senator McCain have greeted so-called rebels on Maidan Square in Ukraine, in Kiev.
А Виктория Нуланд раздавала там булочки.
And Victoria Nuland was delivering some cakes there, cookies.
А теперь посмотрим на гуманитарную ситуацию.
Now let's see the humanitarian situation.
В Йемене она катастрофическая.
In Yemen, it's complete nightmare.
Как и в Ираке, как и в Ливии, как и в Сирии.
In Iraq and Libya, in Syria, the same.
Но посмотрите, несмотря на то, что есть политика санкций, несмотря на то, что сейчас Запад во главе с США ведет против нас информационную и экономическую войну, граждан США из Йемена эвакуировала российская авиация.
But look, no matter the policy of sanctions, no matter this never-ending info wars against Russia, United States citizens were evacuated from Yemen by Russian aviation.
Я сейчас не хочу отстаивать только позицию России и говорить, что только Запад плохой.
I don't want right now to stand just by a position of Russia and claiming that okay, West is bad, only bad.
Я хочу лишь рассказать вам факты.
I just want to deliver you some facts.
Если кто-то хочет, тот может убедиться в правоте.
If one willing to find out, he will find out the truth.
Я помню, как 29 государств НАТО бомбили и гвоздили Ливию томагавками, нарушая нормы международного права.
I remember 29 NATO countries bombing Libya with Tomahawk missiles, regardless of any international laws.
И в тот момент нам удалось поговорить с семьей Каддафи.
At that moment, we had a chance to talk to the family of Gaddafi.
И они нам сказали,
They told us,
Сади сказал Каддафи,
Sadi Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi's son, told us,
они убивают нас за то,
they are killing us
что мы хотим объединить африканские народы.
because we want to unite African nations.
За то, что мы хотим изгнать из Ближнего Востока экстремистов.
Because we want to get rid of extremists in Middle East.
За то, что мы хотим бороться за наши права и за то, чтобы африканские компании начали наконец создавать рабочие места и поднимать экономику своих стран.
Because we want to fight for our rights. We want to fight for the rights of African people so that African companies, African governments would work to improve the life of their citizens.
Мы видели огромный, чего стоит только один проект, рукотворная река, который был построен при Каддафи, который обеспечил людей самым главным в пустыне, водой, через всю Ливию.
We saw the great project, the great river of Muammar Gaddafi built by his order in order to deliver water to the desert lands of this country.
И сейчас все это разрушено.
And now everything is destroyed.
Только вывозится нефть из Ливии.
Only oil is getting extracted from Libya.
Я долгое время знал сейчас уже умершего помощника Саддама Хусейна, доктора Аббаса Халуфа.
I knew for a long time, now late, Abbas Khaluf, he was assistant for Saddam Hussein.
Он проработал с Саддамом Хусейном 25 лет.
He worked for Saddam Hussein over 25 years.
И он сказал, если бы тогда Саддам бы не поддался бы на американские провокации и не начал бы войну с Ираном, сейчас он был бы жив.
And he told me that if Saddam Hussein would not follow US provocation, would not go to war against Iran, he would stay alive up now.
И когда была Генеральная Ассамблея ООН, Каддафи порвал устав ООН и выбросил его, потому что ООН перестала выполнять свои функции. С момента основания ООН в мире произошло более 70 военных конфликтов, в которых погибло людей практически столько же, сколько во времена Великой Отечественной и Второй мировой войны.
During one of the General Assembly of United Nations, Muammar Gaddafi tore the Book of United Nations because this institute completely failed to perform its initial missions. For example, in World War II, millions of people have died, but after World War II there were at least 70 military conflicts and nobody done anything to prevent them. More people died than in World War II.
И в России сейчас выпустили хорошую книгу, она посвящена Чавесу.
In Russia, they have just published new book dedicated to Hugo Chavez.
Эту книгу выпустило правительство.
This book is released by government.
И я хотел бы прочитать одну цитату из нее.
I would like to quote you one quote from this book.
Мы должны восстановить ценности, солидарность и любовь между нами, а не завести ненависть и индивидуализм.
We must restore peace and understanding between ourselves and not to fight for individualism.
Сейчас мы должны все объединяться ради одной идеи,
We
ради справедливости и мира.
must now unite for one idea, for justice and peace.
Мы видим, как через СМИ сейчас пытаются подменить всю позицию Соединенных Штатов в отношении прав человека.
We witness these days how in mass media, they are trying to distort U.S. picture, U.S. country position on human rights.
Америка готовит постоянно доклады о нарушении прав человека в других странах, в том числе и в России.
United States government constantly delivering reports about violations of human rights in every country, especially Russia.
Но по моему личному мнению, Америка сейчас является основным государством, где прорастает сегрегация.
But in my own opinion, United States is the main state now, the state where segregation is growing.
Где нарушаются и попираются нормы права и права человека.
Where human rights are being violated.
Мы солидарны с Мумией Абдул-Джамалем.
We are in solidarity with Mumia Abu Jamal.
Мы солидарны с нашим гражданином России Константином Ярошенко, которого американские спецслужбы похитили из Африки и пытались пытками из него выбить обвинительные признания, в свою очередь. И обвинили его на 20 лет.
We are in solidarity with our Russian citizen Konstantin Yaroshenko, kidnapped from Africa by United States Secret Services, tortured and sentenced for 20 years over falsified case.
Америка тем самым доказала, что она не признает суверенитет ни одной африканской страны, когда нарушала его в Либерии и в других странах Африки.
United States have proven that they do not care for sovereignty of other countries when they violated sovereignty of Liberia and other African countries.
И завершая свое выступление,
and finishing my speech,
я хотел бы еще раз призвать о том, чтобы наши организации во всех странах шли друг другу навстречу, делали тот самый шаг навстречу. Правительства не могут нас разъединить. Все справедливые силы и патриотические силы должны объединяться.
I would like to call upon our organizations, upon our people to unite. Governments cannot divide us. We as people, as societies, as communities must unite.
Бжезинский говорил, новый мировой порядок будет строиться против России и на обломках России.
Brzezinski have told that new world order will be built against Russia and on the ashes of Russia.
Но мы этого не допустим.
But we will not allow this to happen.
Как и не допустим того, чтобы наших союзников и братьев убивали где бы то ни было, на Ближнем Востоке, в Африке и в Латинской Америке.
As we will not allow our friends, our allies, our comrades to be killed in Middle East, in Africa, in Latin America.
Тысячи людей выходят против войны и нарушений прав человека по всему миру.
Thousands of people go into the streets protesting against the war and human rights violation around the world.
И настало время объединения. Сделаем друг другу шаг навстречу. Ухуру!
It is time to unite. Let us make one step closer to each other. Uhuru.
Там, наверное, запаздывает немножко.
Да.
We're going to, Chairman, because of the technology, we're going to ask you to, if you could just use this camera video so that the cameras can see you. Yeah, okay.
Ну, то есть Омали стать у камеры, чтобы мы его могли видеть.
Right there, Chairman. We're going to use that.
Oh, that's not the same camera.
Yes, no, it's not the same time. We need to use this one for this.
We just need you to the technical reasons. Because of the deadline, we're going to ask you to review this camera.
It's not. Go ahead, Jim.
It's just really, it's really good to see these comrades again. We spent a lot of time with each other in Moscow. We traveled all over Moscow, and I was speaking earlier about what gracious hosts they were, and it's the warm embrace that we received from the Russian people out there. And I also think it's really important to say that the trip that we just made to Russia and to Moscow was a really important trip because we wanted to establish a connection between the Russian people and the various other organizations in Russia with the actual African liberation movement. That we know that the anti-globalization movement of Russia, for example, has been in contact with various forces in the United States. And I'm happy to say that one of those contacts was with Sister Margaret Kimberly, who was with Black Agenda Report and with the Black is Back Coalition. And she played a really important role in our going to Moscow as well. But the thing is that the Russians or any other people, most other people around the world, have only been able to be in touch with African liberals or people who are in the camp of imperialism, who are interested in trying to reform imperialism rather than understanding the necessity to be involved in a struggle for the liberation of our people. Africans not only here, but throughout the continent of Africa. The comrade mentioned Malcolm X, who was one of the leaders that helped to establish the national liberation movement around the world, but who was murdered by the United States government. Then there was even people like Martin Luther King, murdered by the United States government. There was an organization, the Black Panther Party, destroyed, assassinated by the United States government. There was Patrice Lumumba, hunted like an animal and murdered in the Congo by the United States government. There was Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first independent president of independent Ghana, overthrown by the United States government and made of poison. So there has, after all of this, after the capture of a wounded Che Guevara and his assassination and all of the damage that they've done around the world, most of the people around the world had an opportunity with the African liberation movement. So they would meet people who were fundamentally representatives of the United States government and not representatives of the revolutionary movement of African people. And our presence in Moscow allowed us to reestablish contact in the around the world. So it was really important for us to be in Moscow, and these were really important contacts. So I don't know if there is anything that you are here to have an opportunity to comrades. I think they can hear us. If you wanted to raise any kinds of questions, make any kind of observations, the comrades there in Moscow, this is an opportunity to do that. Why don't you come up here so that, because you're being live streamed. Come here. Step right here. Yeah.
Chairman, the propaganda that in the United States that had 20 odd some odd years about the dismantling of Marxist principles within the former Soviet Union, that they all practice Marxism, believe in the free market. What do you speak to that? What your observations were like there?
I think that's generally true. But to say that the Russian government, the Soviet government has been dismantled, and the government in place is not a socialist government, it's not a Marxist government or anything like that. But it was the socialist revolution that brought Russia into modern history. It was the socialist revolution that overturned the semi-feudal state of unity to Russia, and regardless of whether there is a Marxist or socialist government in power, the Russian character has been shaped by the influence of the Russian Revolution. It is a society that came into existence through revolution, where you look at most of the European society came into existence as a bourgeois society based on colonialism, and in this country, it's a society that was based on stealing land from indigenous people, Mexico, and then enslaving people. And that's the thing that many people outside of America do not understand. They like to treat America conceptually as their own countries. They think America came through the same experience, and it came from an entirely different experience. And they would do better to understand America has been a society similar to Israel, to the South Africa, where Europeans go there, set up a state on somebody else's land, get fat off somebody else's resources. It's not like Russia. And it's not even, and so I think that's really important. So Marxism is not a prevailing system there, but I'm going to tell you one of the best things happened to me on this trip that I did not mention. I forgot exactly where we were coming from, but we got caught in the rain. And so we went in an underpass to escape from the rain. And in this underpass, there were these shops that was there. You know, people could, buy all kinds of stuff. And one of the shops was a bookstore, an old bookstore, that you could probably only find maybe in Europe or maybe, like someplace like Russia. And Comrade Alex, I saw him talking and negotiating something with the person who ran the bookstore. And so and I'm just really sightseeing in the underpass, and then after a while, Alex comes up to me and he gives me this gift. And this gift is 2 volumes of works, first edition works by Carl. So I said, this guy knows how to seduce me, right? but saying this, I would also say that more than half the population in Russia really look up to Stalin. Stalin, that's what they look up to. And I think that's really important. It says something, and even Putin has expressed regret for the disappearance of the Soviet Union himself. So they're not socialists, but they're extraordinarily patriotic. Nationalism is very deep in Russia. Patriotism is very deep in Russia. And Obama and anybody who thinks that they can march into Moscow, march into the Soviet Union, or they can break the spirit or the will of the Russian people with these so-called sanctions, they're out of saying that would not happen. That's not the Russia that I just left. Stalin is also involved right now in translation. Stalin was the one who was translating for us for the duration for the entire time I was there. This is yours.
As I watched when they first started the small election to elect that guy that they wanted to be president of the U.S., the Russian people, well, the people told them we're Russian, but the day of the election, they broke the machine, they shut down some of the polls, they did everything they could think of before people to discourage them. And they came on CNN, and this Russian woman, a mother looked like, stocky woman, like 30, 40 years, and she said, we're not going nowhere. We're going to stay right here, we're going to vote. We're Russian now, we're Russian then, we'll be Russian from now on.
Yeah.
Hey, they are great people.
Yeah.
Really? I know that.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that they can make real Russian people like that. They're out of their minds. They're drinking. I don't know if comrades Alex wanted to say anything. Is there anybody else who wanted to raise any questions before we move forward? I cannot express just how generous these comrades were, the comrades who functioned as my hosts. They took me places that I don't think that people who tour Moscow normally go. I had an opportunity to meet extraordinary forces, and that was what was so magnificent, because the kind of the cross-section of the population that we have an opportunity to meet there. I mean, you know, I was there until 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm up with the night wolves, a motorcycle club, right? And these comrades were just extraordinary. As I said, they're patriots, and they express. And the Night Wolves is the first motorcycle club that's ever been registered in Russia. And so there were, but there are thousands of them. And so they're in Russia, and then there were also Syrian Night Wolves. And there were comrades in Syria who were, you know, there in the compound of the Night Wolves. And this is an organization that does tremendous work, like children. They have their own line of clothing. They do what do you call them? Concerts and things like that. It's just a really important and extraordinary force, and they're highly political. Yes.
Chairman, I've read much about active presence from Moscow throughout Russia. There's an elected official a few years back who made history being the first African to mayor of the town. You see the Africans in Moscow and throughout Russia across the visit. And is there still a trace of movement, history of warfare that you've seen as prevalent about the 60s and 70s?
The place that I spoke, the university, it was once the Patrice Lumumba University. It's no longer Patrice Lumumba University. It is, I think, something like the Russian Friendship University, Russian People's Friendship University, or something like that. So it's no longer Patrice Lumumba. And the first Africans I met when I was there were two brothers from Ethiopia. One had been in Ethiopia, in Moscow for 24 years, the other for 29 years. And I think that's a statement of something about what they found in Russia. The only other African I had a direct contact with was a sister who worked at a restaurant where we ate. And she was just somebody who was kind of obvious to me. There was no formal meeting, but I did ask her, you know, like how she got the name that she had, and she told me her father was from France. And that's not saying much, because Africans from France come from someplace else, just like Africans in this country come from someplace else. And her father had been dead for 3 years, and she said her stepfather was from Nigeria. So, I mean, that was sort of like an African presence there. And so I didn't have an opportunity, but there is such a place called Pushkin, I think it's Pushkin Square. Are people here familiar with Alexander Pushkin? who was an African who actually could be considered like the father of Russian literature. And there's a statue of him there, and I brought back some Pushkin chocolate gifts to some of the comrades who are here. So that was the only thing I saw. I didn't have an opportunity to meet with Africans, you know, other than that while I was there.
Alex do want to speak, Chairman.
Okay, we want Alex to go ahead and say a few things before we close it out and understand.
Say who is Alex and Sala, and we really want to thank you from the Central Committee of the African Socialist Party.
That's how they see you.
From the Central Committee of the African Socialist Party for taking care of our chairman. We think that this alliance that we're forming right now is timely and it's very, very important in the lives of African people. And we expect to have a long alliance with the Russian people because as our chairman taught us that we're in the final offensive of imperialism. And we just look forward to moving into the future, into a new world. So we want to really thank you for, you know, for taking care of our chairman and for the gracious, you know, your graciousness.
So Alex.
And we expect to have
You gotta wait to catch up.
And we just look forward to
You guys ready?
Yes. Ты готов?
Да.
Давай.
Я еще раз благодарю всех своих братьев и коллег.
Sorry?
Говорить?
Shall we talk?
I don't know why they're not talking.
Говори, говори.
Можно, да?
Говори, вперед.
Я еще раз хотел бы поприветствовать наших уважаемых товарищей из движения Ухуру.
I greet again our dearest comrades from Uhuru movement.
Я рад приветствовать всех наших коллег, с которыми движение Ухуру работает и сотрудничает.
I greet everybody of our colleagues with whom Uhuru movement is working and cooperating.
Я хочу сказать вам,
I want to tell you,
время поражений прошло, наступило время побед.
the time. Так, погоди, сейчас. The time of. По-моему, нет. Moment.
Все. На этом все закончилось.
Так.
Их нету.
Может, у них интернет заглючил. Время поражений закончилось. Слушай, ну я не понимаю, они тут или нет. Я им пишу.
Кстати, нас показывают в прямой трансляции.
А, то есть то, что мы сейчас говорим, это идет в прямом эфире? О, я тебя вижу. Так, значит, говори, наверное. Так, слушай, я не могу. Ты тут?
Я-то тут.
Ну так говори тогда, говори. Значит, глюк какой-то получился. Говори что-нибудь, раз нас показывают.
Ну, я вижу нашу трансляцию, да.
Ну прекрасно, говори что-нибудь. А, погоди.
Я не знаю, слышат ли они меня или нет.
I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Да. Мы будем объединяться в любом случае.
We must unite no matter what.
Здесь мы...
We back.
We back? Are you back? Окей, так, по-моему, они получили. Так, погоди, слушай.
Yeah, so we can hear you.
Так.
Yeah, we hear you.
Да, мы слышим. Они слышат нас. Давай.
Здесь у меня есть листовки, которые мы раздавали на наших акциях в Москве.
I have these flyers which we have delivered on our demonstrations in Moscow.
Многие люди в России солидарны с активистами в Фергюсоне и Балтиморе.
Many people in Russia are in solidarity with activists in Ferguson and Baltimore.
И сегодня мы стоим плечом к плечу для того, чтобы бороться с расизмом, с сегрегацией и с нарушением прав человека.
And today we stand side by side in order to fight racism, segregation and human rights violations.
И мы дадим жесткий отпор тем, кто еще болеет колониализмом.
And we will stand against those who are promoting neocolonialism.
Мы будем бороться с теми, кто хочет делить людей по национальному признаку, по цвету их кожи и по их вероисповеданию.
We will fight those who want to divide people by a racial basis or by skin color or by religious bias.
Мы будем выступать за сохранение африканской культуры.
We will stand by saving of African cultures.
И сегодня для активистов Ухуру справедлив лозунг.
And today, for activists of Uhuru, the slogan is working.
Там, где мы, там Африка.
Where the place we are in, it's the place of Africa.
Ухуру.
Uhuru.
So, can I come at this? We're going to close the meeting now, but I want to express again our deep appreciation to you, to your participation, and we'll be talking more about how we can become more involved in united actions. I'm also looking forward to a similar participation by the anti-globalization movement of Russia, Comrade Alex and Slavo. In August, with the Black Hispanic Coalition, we'll be having our conference in Philadelphia. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to speak to that conference in Philadelphia in the same way that you were able to speak to us here today. I think it's important for us to have these public demonstrations of solidarity between the Russian people and the actual struggle of African people who are engaged in fighting for peace and for liberation. So we want to express our deepest appreciation to you. And we want to continue to talk. I'm looking forward to the possibility of being in Moscow in September. And certainly looking forward to your participation with us with the Black Hispanic Conference that's going to be held in August in Philadelphia. Uhuru.
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 Long live the solidarity between the African and Russian people. Uhuru.
Stop.
We'll stop what?
I don't think, are you open for them to respond?
No.
It's over, right?
Okay. It's over.
All right, guys. Thank you. Uhuru.
Okay, thank you. Uhuru.
Everybody, they see y'all, man. Give them a nice little round of applause. They can see y'all.
Where's the camera that's doing that? No, don't do that.
All right.
Okay. End it.
All right.
Shut it down.
Uhuru.